Okay, so we're going to now switch our attention to Excel. Right? So we're all pretty good at Word now. So we're going to focus on Excel. Excel is a product very similar to Word. It's made by Microsoft. It's part of Office. But it's more geared towards doing calculations. So it follows the idea of Word that there's a normal view and there's ribbons across the top, and from the ribbons you can get sub-ribbons and find things to do with your Excel spreadsheet. But like I say, it's geared more towards computations. So we're going to go over the normal view. We can have headers and footers. We can do things like enter the current date, file name, very similar to what we've done with Excel. They're going to be, Excel is mostly squares inside a bunch of rectangles. And in each of the rectangles, you could either put words, type in text, you could put numbers in those cells, and you could also put in formulas to do computation based on data in other cells. So we're going to look at ranges of cells. We're going to be able to merge cells, align cells, and apply accents, very similar to Word, so it's good that we have those skills from Word. We will be able to put labels on columns and rows, and we can change the font and increase and decrease the width of the rows. We will also be able to do functions on ranges of data. So if you have a bunch of a column filled with numbers, we can then have one cell equal, let's say, the total of all the numbers, or the average of all the numbers, or what is the maximum or the minimum of that range of numbers. We can also format the way the data in the cells is presented. So you could say maybe it's money you're trying to represent. So you'd want to have a dollar sign in front of it, and maybe a period with 2 decimal places after it if you're going to have dollars and cents. So you could format the cells to look like currency. You could have a comma in it at a certain place if you want like 1,000 to be 1,000. You could add commas. You could have it be a total style, which is what accountants use when you have a whole bunch of numbers and then at the bottom you total everything up. So once we go over how we can do functions in cells and formatting the cells, we may have a pattern that we want the function to be repeated everywhere. So we can autofill when a clear pattern is set, and we can use absolute cell values if needed. So we'll get into that shortly. We can use grid lines when printing. So we have this enormous spreadsheet, we want to send it to the printer. Well, it can't print the whole thing. It'll break it up into pages, and we can see how the pages are going to be broken up. Unlike Word, Excel has multiple sheets inside of one file. And just like Word, we can do spelling and grammar checking. Okay, so for example, we have a normal view. We can have headers and footers. We can enter the current date, file name, things like that. So where is it located? Well, headers and footers are exactly the same as in Word. You go to the layout part of the ribbon, and then you can insert headers and footers. You can go to the layout page and click on the headers and footers tab. And you can put headers and footers that would appear on every page in your printout. Okay, so a range of cells. When you open up Excel, you're going to see it's going to be a bunch of squares, right? So here's a row, and here are the columns. The rows are identified by numbers, starting at 1 and going off to, I think, 65,000 or something like that. And the columns are depicted with letters. So the squares can have names, like, for example, I could say, where is B3? Well, it's column B, row 3. So here it says dishwasher in the cell B3. So like I say, you can type words into the cells. You can type, these look like, code numbers for the item that it is. And then you could also have prices. You could have a column full of prices. So these prices, these cells were formatted to be currency. That's why we have dollar signs and periods. So for example, the item number is W448 132, that describes a dishwasher, a washing machine. The price of the washing machine is $450, and we have 3 of them in stock right now. So this is kind of like a database of our inventory. So this column is a set of numbers, a set of integers. This column is a set of prices, which is why it's in the currency format. This column is a set of strings, so it's just describing what the product is. And this is also a set of strings. We can have a heading for the columns. So this is item code, description, price, and in stock, how many we have in stock. So, so this is something that we can do in Excel. Now, so let's say, for example, we wanted to have columns highlighted. Well, one thing we can do is we can shade a row and have all of the columns have a heading. And we can make the background color yellow. We can make the print bold. We can put a box around it. There's lots of ways we could identify the heading. So, so this top row is a heading row, and everything else below it is data. This looks like a bunch of people, last name, first name, where they live, and what their phone number is. So it's another way to store organized data. In Word, you could make a table like this, but we could do things like we can sort these names by people's last name if we wanted to. So there's a lot more functionality in Excel that you wouldn't be able to do in Word. So, so the location of where you can do this is you actually shade the cells you want to make a heading out of, and then you apply font changes to it. Okay. So we can do functions on cells. So for example, there's a difference between a function and a formula. So for example, if I wanted to take a cell and say, instead of putting the number 3 into it, I could say this cell is equal to 1 plus 2. So I could go right into a cell and I could say equal sign. I hit the equal sign and I say 1, the plus sign, and a 2, and hit enter. It will not print out equal 1 plus 2, it'll print out a 3, because it will calculate the formula, 1 plus 2, and then say that cell is equal to the result of the formula, so that would be a 3. I could also put in what's called a function. A function is different from a formula. A function, I could say, this cell, I could put in a cell and I could say this cell equals the sum of 1 and 2. And that's a function. Now, that's not a very interesting function. These are 2 different ways to have a 3 show up in the cell. What's more interesting in this case, this is a little bit smaller. Let me just blow this up so you can see it a little bit better. What we're doing here is we're basically saying, here is, and I hope you can see this, this is mangoes, oranges, tomatoes, cooking oil, and cauliflower. This is the quantity, this is how many we have again in stock. Here's the price. Now here the price, we didn't format it to be currency, it's just numbers, but hopefully those are dollars. And if I wanted to know how much do I have, how much the quantity times the price, how much in value do I have in my inventory, I could make this column, this with the heading of subtotal, I could say this is equal to this cell, which is C4, I could say equals C4 times D4. C4 times D4 is 5,400. So that's what this animation is doing. So now, if I want to know how much money, how much value of mangoes do I have, I can say 9 mangoes times, I guess this is not $600 a mango, this must be $6 a mango. 9 times $6 for mangoes, I have $54 worth of mangoes in my inventory. Now you start to notice there's a pattern. On every one of these rows, the subtotal is going to be the value in the C column, C4 times D4 equals, is what E4 should equal. This is the total of this number times this number. So in the cell, you're writing equals C4 times D4. hit enter, 5,400. You'll notice that this pattern, what goes in this box, this one should be calculated by having the number of oranges times the price of an orange, and have that put here. And the pattern should be the number of tomatoes times the price of a tomato, that goes here. So once I do this first calculation, this is kind of moving quickly, C4 times D4 equals this number. I can then put the cursor on this box, grab the lower right corner and just drag it down, and the formula will be replicated in all these squares. So I'm now autofilling the formula for all of the items that we have in stock. You can add all of these up, and then what we could have done is have a total at the bottom, and in this cell I could say equals sum, and shade this whole range and add them all up and get one big total at the end. But this is just demonstrating the autofill property, that once you get one formula set, if the pattern repeats everywhere, you can just say, copy this formula pattern to all of these boxes, and they'll all get filled in. That's called autofilling the formula that you create. So in a very, very short amount of time, you could sum up all of the quantity times the price, put the total here, and then have all the totals here. We could also then, in another step, have a formula that totals up all the totals. So instead of it just being subtotals, we'd have one overall total. Okay. Okay, yeah, let me just go over one other thing. Suppose hypothetically we had one number that remained in one square. So let's say we had a number up here, let's say the tax rate, all right? And we just put the tax rate up in this square. And let's say we want to have another column that says, here's how much money we have, but then with tax, here's what it is. So we would want to have this square, we would say equals this number times the tax number. And if we autofill that, then the tax number up here and the number over here would start moving downward. So the tax value would start moving when we autofill it. We would want the tax value to not move. The tax value, the address of the tax value, let's say we put it in slot E1, right into here. As we're copying it, we don't want it moving. We want it to stay stationary. So that's what's called the absolute address. And the way we represent an absolute address, you're going to have this in one of your homework assignments, the way we would represent the absolute address would be by, instead of calling it E1, we can put a $ in front of the E or the 1 or both, which basically means if you're going to use autofill to copy a formula, that field should not move with the formula. That box should remain stationary. So since we don't want the 1 to change, we would actually make the address E$1. That would mean it would always stay in the first row. No matter how much you copied it down, the row won't change with it. So we would put the absolute address in our formula, so that way when we copy it, it doesn't change. Okay. And then there's also grid lines for printing. So when you go to print something, because these sheets have so many columns and so many rows, when you go to print it, the size of paper is fixed, whereas your spreadsheet is way too big to fix everything. Everything just go to the printer. So you might have one spreadsheet, but when you go to print it, it prints out on 6 pages. So you want to know how much is considered one page of printing. So you can go to the grid lines. You go, the location is under view, and then under view you click on grid lines. And it will show you the grid lines, basically telling you how it will be broken up when you send it to the printer. Because eventually, you're either going to email this to somebody or you're eventually going to print it. You don't want the printing to look strange. You could also, if you have a heading, like a date, a bill number, if you had a heading like this, but it went 4 pages down, you you would want at the top of every printout, you would want the heading to appear at the top of every page. You can designate that the heading should always appear at the top of every printable page. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, one thing that is very good that Excel uses is, unlike Word, where you just open up a document and you have one document, Word has multiple spreadsheets on it. So at the bottom, you'll have, when you open it up, you can always add another one. You hit the plus sign and it adds an extra spreadsheet. And then you can click on these and hop around from spreadsheet to spreadsheet. So for example, suppose you wanted to have one file, one Excel file, and you wanted on one spreadsheet to have the sales from week 1. So this looks like we sold a lot of tables. We sold 782 tables, 123 chairs, and 243 desks. And that all happened during week 1. Now suppose we want to have this same spreadsheet for each week. So now we go to week 2. Well, we could copy the data down into a lower part of the sheet, but then it's going to get very, very long. And we want it to look the same every time we go to a particular week. So what we can do is we can hit the plus sign, create a new tab, let's say called week 2, and you can click on the tab and change its name. If you want, I think Excel starts you off with sheet 1, and then if you add one, it calls it sheet 2. But you can change the name to whatever you want. And then you would click on sheet, the week 2 sheet, and this would go away and this one would pop up. And now you have tables, chairs, and desks again, and you have different sales for that week. If you decide I want to go back and look at week 1, you can just hit this tab and it brings this back. So that's where we can have multiple spreadsheets. Now also, if you are doing a formula and you wanted to take data from multiple sheets, you can do that too. You can, on a third sheet, let's say you had 10 weeks. So suppose you had 10 different sheets, and then you wanted to have one final sheet called the total sheet, the total for the 10 weeks. And let's say you wanted to add up all the tables sold for the entire 10 weeks. You can, on your totals sheet, you can have a cell that you say equals. Then you can come to sheet 1, click on tables, and the address on the total sheet would show up as sheet 1, exclamation point, and then it would be B3, plus sheet 2, row B, exclamation, I'm sorry, sheet, week 2, WK2, exclamation point, meaning from that sheet, get B3, and you can sum up all the sales for all the tables throughout all the weeks on a separate sheet. So you don't have to just, when you're doing a formula, you don't have to just give a row and a column, the row number and the column number. You could also say the sheet it's from and the row and the column from that sheet, and that could be used on, as in a formula on a different sheet. So it really depends on what data you're collecting and how you want to lay it out. So, and then always, as always, in all Microsoft products, since you are putting a lot of words into your sheets, because you have all these numbers, but you want to know what these numbers mean, you're going to put a lot of words into them. You could also do spelling, spell check and grammar check. And so that you're probably comfortable with from Word. Under Word, it's also under Review, and then you click Spelling, and that's how to do that. So we'll start off with a hopefully somewhat easy assignment to work on, where we're filling in data in ranges and summing things up, putting formulas in, formatting some columns, formatting some cells, creating multiple sheets, and we're going to do one with an absolute address when we're auto-filling a formula. So we can do that.